So welcome today. Often we have our webinars late in the afternoon. So here's a noontime webinar. And I kind of like the energy myself of coming together in the middle of the day for a topic like this. So we're so glad you're here. So Dr. Michele Rivers Murphy and I have written a couple books on mindfulness, and that's been a springboard for a lot of what we're doing. For about the last decade, the Center for Educational Improvement has been focused on heart-centered learning, which is kind of our brand of what we do with mindfulness and social emotional learning. And there's some really important reasons we focus on that. We'll get there in just a minute, but I want to first say, if you have questions as we go along, please enter them in the chat box. We'll do our best to get back to you quickly. And we also are reserving the last 10 minutes for Q&A time. So keep that in mind. We've got a full agenda. I'm going to start with a meditation. So if you would close your eyes or lower your gaze and focus either with a lower gaze or at the center of your forehead. Take a couple long, deep breaths. And as you focus on the breathing, let go. Just let go of any thoughts, any concerns. As you continue to breathe, make sure the breath gets deep into the belly, inhaling and expanding the abdomen as if you're blowing up a balloon. Sustain the breath. Exhale, pull the navel point to the spine and hold your breath out. And repeat one more time, inhaling deeply. Sustain your breath. Exhale, pulling your navel point to the spine and holding your breath out. Then inhale and put your hands over your heart, left hand on the heart, right hand over the left, sitting with a straight spine, breathing deeply. And imagine in a distance, stars, a starry sky. Feel the awe and the wonder of being there, gazing up and seeing stars twinkling. And then you notice one that twinkles just a little brighter. And as you focus your gaze on that star, an image comes to mind of someone you love, someone who may need support. Take your right hand and reach out to that star, to that image of that person, and pull it into your heart. Breathing deeply. Feeling the warmth of your love. And then look back up at the sky again. And there's another star twinkling brightly. And again, reach out and grab hold of that star, that person, that image that comes to mind, and pull it into your heart. Feel the warmth, the love. Then inhale deeply and exhale and open your eyes. So that's one of the heart beaming exercises we have in a little pamphlet we've developed. These are simple exercises you can do with students in the middle of the day. Those odd moments when you feel like there may be a need just to help students center and relax, let go. So Michele, as we proceed, let's think about mindful heart-centered learning. As you think about that, what comes to mind? You're on mute.
One of the things that David Hornick, the superintendent in Massachusetts, described our work, heart-centered learning and mindfulness practice, was a breath of fresh air. No pun intended with that. And really what comes to mind, Chris, is we wrote mindfulness practices based on neuroscience and the tremendous impact that trauma and suffering have on brains and what we were seeing in schools across the country, right? With both students and staff. And the CDC says that unhealed emotions have this profound impact on personal relationships, health choices, and chronic disease. So with mindfulness practices, we can help build those stronger connections between the areas of the brain that stress and traumatic experiences have compromised. So quite simply, heart is needed to help us heal. Heart is needed to help us lean in and connect and support so that we can get through this particular time that much easier and together. And all components from yogic movement, mindfulness, and meditation are needed. A simplified path forward means to come back to self, right? And what's most important to us? We have this shared responsibility to take time to take care of ourselves so that in turn, we can take care of others that are counting on us, whether it's our own students, our own children, clients, coworkers, employees, work or neighbors. And we must pay attention to our health and well-being. So choosing this simplified path means this, Chris. It means cultivating coherence, clarity, calm, and connection within. And this can be accomplished if we practice first through mindfulness meditation, being fully present, and yogic movement.
Thank you, Michele. So, Brian, I'm going to turn to you next. And as I turn to our panelists, would you just give your full name, your position, and maybe something about your connection to us, to CEI, or to these practices? And I'll just say, Brian and also Dr. Berge and I began our work together in about 2016, when their school in Pennsylvania was one of our pilot sites for some of our initial work. So we've been working together off and on for a long time, and it's so great to have you with us today. So Brian.
Sure. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. So my name is Brian Akins, and I work at an elementary school and teach students who have emotional and behavioral needs. And I also do consulting work on the side with other school districts in the area. And I began incorporating these practices, probably about 2012. And the reason was simply because I was finding my students that didn't have a way to understand or manage their emotional needs. And I found that I was the one who was managing those needs. And so I wanted to give them the skills and the practices to be able to do that on their own. And so, we started implementing these practices, and you can definitely see the change in attitudes, the change in their personal reflections, and also a change in how they care about other people too. So, which has been really nice. So I'll share a couple of the mindfulness practices that we use in our school, and some of my favorites that I find to be the most helpful for the students. And the first one would be the bell of mindfulness. And this is something that I came across on a retreat, a personal retreat on my own, a meditation retreat that I was on. And I have a bell that's hooked up to my computer. This bell goes off every 30 minutes in my classroom. And when that bell goes off, no matter what we are doing, it's the signal to everyone that we just pause and we take 3 long, slow, deep breaths. We know that, getting oxygen to the brain, increases brain efficiency. In your book, Dr. Mason and Michele, you guys talk about how it elevates our mood and it regulates the nervous system. It reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. And so I wanted to give them a consistent practice that was happening regularly. So when they did face circumstances that were frustrating, or they're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, they could come back to just their breath again. So the bell rings every 30 minutes and we take 3 long, slow in breaths and out breaths. And when we're done, we all just raise our hand. So that way we know that everybody has completed their breathing, and then we can go back to what we're doing. And this has been such a good practice because one, it happens consistently, like I mentioned, but also the level of respect that everybody shows each other, because we could be in the middle of recess, indoor recess, or we could be in the middle of me teaching a math lesson or them doing a writing piece or something, and everyone is stopping and respecting each other. And if I could share anything that I've done in my career, this is probably one of the biggest things because of that consistent practice that it provides, without even me thinking about it, because that bell rings. But again, the big piece there being they're focusing on their breathing. They're coming back to that breath. And before the year starts, as the year begins, we talk about the breathing, and we talk about the science behind it. We talk about the impacts on the brain. So they're able to make that connection with the science behind it too. And as elementary kids, they're interested in what's happening with their brains. The other practice I have is a mindful jar, and I brought one of my students' mindful jars here. And it's fairly simple. It's nothing more than water and glitter inside the jar. And I'm sure many people here have already heard about this or used it, but it's the one thing that I find that the kids really like to use because it's a little creative. They get to pick their colors. It's personalized to them. But I also, again, go back to talking about the science of the brain and the impact that this has on the brain. So I share with the students that this right now, even though it looks murky in the camera, is pretty clear. And so when they're calm and they're feeling well, they're feeling good, this is similar to what their brain looks like. It's nice and calm and they can think clearly. But when they become frustrated, all the glitter is kind of representative of the thoughts that are going on inside of their head. And with all those thoughts, it's very hard to think clearly. And when they're frustrated, when we get frustrated, it is very difficult to think clearly. And so again, I go back to that breathing, Dr. Mason, of finding a piece of glitter, following your in-breath and your out-breath, paying attention to that breathing and watching that glitter settle back down to the bottom. I have students who just love to do this. I put a little cup holder attached to their desk, so it's right next to their desk. They have access to it at all times, and they can always come back to this. And this is probably a fan favorite in the classroom. Another one that I'll just share, the final one I'll share is bunny breaths, and I think you might call it quick sniffs in your book, but bunny breaths for elementary students. And I'm not sure if you're aware of Andrew Huberman's work out of Stanford, but he talks about how this is the physiological sigh. And this happens oftentimes when we're feeling stressed or we're feeling anxious. Happens like if we're claustrophobic, right? And so the reason what's happening with that stress hormone, we have too much carbon dioxide in our lungs, too much in our blood. And so he talks about taking 2 quick breaths and then exhaling through our mouth. And so we have bunny breath. We make up little props like carrots and pretending that we're little bunnies. And so they can take the carrot out, and so like they're smelling the carrot. So it's just 2 quick breaths in. So, and then that long exhale out.
Let's practice that together, okay?
Yes.
Want to go ahead and lead it, Brian?
So Dr. Huberman recommends doing this at least 3 or 4 times because it takes us about 40 seconds to alter our heart rate. So just to begin, we're going to take those 2 quick breaths in, so you can do it together with us. And then that long exhale out the mouth. And then again. And we'll go one more, 2 quick breaths. And the research behind that, Dr. Mason, that I love is he talks about how that is just one of the quickest ways that we can calm ourselves down. And for elementary kids, connecting it as a bunny breath it's a fun name, and it's something that they can easily do. And I actually have students who are doing it, and I don't even realize that they're doing it, which is wonderful.
So Brian, if you could put the name of the researcher, maybe the citation or the year in the chat box, if you have it,
sure,
that might be helpful.
Yep.
Good. So next part, moving right along, is yogic movements. And this is where you get a chance to stand if you want to. And I'm just going to show you a couple of quick things that kids can do right at their desks, right beside their desks. Hopefully this will work. I always wondered, do I have my camera at the right angle? We'll find out. Okay, you can see me. Raise your hands up and you just shake, 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 shake. You can actually squat down and shake and stand up and shake and keep shaking, keep shaking, keep going, keep going. Come on, now this is the time. Keep doing it. Palms to the ceiling, stretch up. Whew. And now sway to the side like a tree. When you go to the left, the right hip really goes out, and then the other side. Inhaling up and exhaling as you go to the side. And some shoulder shrugs, inhaling up, exhaling down. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, with all this sitting in front of screens, shoulder shrugs become more important. Inhaling up, exhaling down, and then the variation, inhale up, exhale as you rotate your shoulders back, down. Excellent. And so Carrie, you're next. I know you've been doing this in your school district, so please let us know more about what you're doing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Vieira. I work as an instructional specialist for secondary English here in Montgomery County Public Schools. We're in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and we have about a little over 160,000 students in our district. Prior to my current role is based in our central office, but prior to that, I was a middle school and high school English teacher for 11 years in the classroom. And I started mindfulness practices with the students in informal ways at that time, but that was years ago. And it's only more recently that we're finding a lot more openness to mindfulness. And the one thing, I'm going to share a couple of things, but one thing that I've been doing most recently has been offering mindfulness classes for free for our staff every Monday evening. And this is now our 5th school year that we've been doing this. And I find that this has been really important. You know, especially during this period, during the pandemic, we've seen attendance in these sessions double during this time, but having a space for staff members to take time for themselves and to develop their own practice, I have found has been incredibly valuable to reaching more students, because the more staff members, the more adults in the system, in the schools that have their own practice of mindfulness and health and wellness, then they're just naturally sharing that out with their students. And it doesn't become an added thing. It becomes a way of being in the classroom, a way of just moving through your day. And I find that to be the most integrated and transformative approach. So some of the things that I have found, so I'm speaking from the secondary perspective. Brian shared just now from things that are working well with elementary, but I work mostly with middle and high school students. So I'll share a little bit of things that have worked well in my experience with this particular age group. I think breathing practices always work well for all kids. The one we just did, you know, the short inhales in and the long exhale out, that would work with all kids. And, you know, generally speaking, inviting students to be aware of how their breath moves and to just have them notice that throughout the class. This doesn't have to be added to your content, but just, you know, if you notice, for example, that kids are getting stressed out about a test coming up, you know, have just a simple cue, a prompt that just says, take a moment to notice how you're feeling. How's your breath moving? You know, and maybe you can start to slow down the movement of your breath and make your exhales long. I'm a fan of the long exhalations. And so we can, you know, just take a moment here, do that ourselves, because we can always take this pause during our day. So just, you know, soften your gaze and bring your attention to your breath and notice how your breath is moving. Move it naturally and just see where it naturally stops and changes course. And in a gentle, easy way, start to deepen your inhale and make the exhale a little slower. And take your exhale out as long as you possibly can take it. And again, inhale deeply. And as you exhale, just let it go like you're taking it for a long, slow walk. And take one more breath like this. And don't cut your breath short on the inhale. If you think you're done inhaling, take an extra sip of breath in. And same thing on the breath out. If you think you're done, see if you can push out a little extra more air, and then let the breath be natural again. So any kind of breath awareness, that takes 30 seconds of time. You can do that right before kids start to take their exam, and think of how a student begins that exam from that space of just a little bit more quiet and ease versus a state of, oh my gosh, the test is starting. Okay. So anytime we can build in, and again, the more that the staff members themselves have their own practice, they naturally see those opportunities. So it's not like, there's not a regimented approach, like we're going to do mindfulness here and mindfulness there and mindfulness there, but you feel the opportunities. You feel when the students might be experiencing that anxiety, and you can be responsive to it. Another really nice practice that works well for students is tensing and releasing the muscles in their body. Because again, a lot of times they don't even know how their body is responding to the stress that they have. And this makes them aware of their stress, and then it helps them show how to let it go. So we can do a simple practice here too, by just bringing our attention to our feet and curling up our toes, tensing up the muscles in our feet a little bit around our ankles, up through our shins, around our shins and calves. Hold your muscles tight, but not so much that you give yourself a cramp, just enough to get some activation there. Tighten up your thighs, your hamstrings, around your hips. Tighten up your abdominal muscles around your belly, up to your chest. Roll your hands into fists, lengthen your arms and tighten up your muscles in your arms. You can relax your gaze, but draw your shoulders up towards your ears and scrunch up all the muscles in your face. I tell the kids, just make a really funny, silly face and just hold all the muscles tight. Take a deep breath in, hold, exhale through your mouth and let everything go. Let your body be as relaxed as it possibly can be. And just take a moment here to breathe and feel how it is to let go of everything you're carrying. And so one last practice, so that's also just a nice one for getting them to get in touch with their body. And one last practice that I wanted to share was another one that I find fun with the students, and they think I've done this, I've taught theater as well. And so, this was, the kids are performing, but they're actually having fun and practicing mindfulness. They don't know that they're practicing mindfulness. And I find that sometimes you don't have to make mindfulness, a thing. You don't even have to label it mindfulness. You just integrate the practices very naturally. So I have the kids pretend that we are all aliens, and we have just arrived on planet Earth. And because we are aliens, we have no language. We have no words. We don't know what anything is. We don't know what our body even is. We've never seen it before. We've never seen our surroundings. We've never seen a table, a chair, anything. And so I invite the students to move through, I walk them through an experience of moving through the classroom. It's a movement exercise. And just looking around as if they're seeing everything for the very first time. Having them discover their hands, having them discover sounds in the room, having them discover smells, sights, without the interference of language and words. And I find when we do things like that, it really invites kids into a really quiet space, which they don't have nearly enough of in their lives, especially for adolescents. And I find that the most beautiful thing we can do is hold the space for the students, however they are, however they arrive. We're going to invite them into that quiet space, and there's going to be a lot of resistance because that's just naturally the way it is. But the more that we hold the space, the more they'll be invited in. So thank you.
So Carrie, thank you. Wow. Wise words, great practices. And now we have Dr. Arinthia Harris, who has been a faculty member with CEI since I think about 2014, and got her doctorate, I think, was it last fall, Arinthia?
Yep.
Go ahead. Tell us about your practice.
So, hey, everybody, I'm Dr. O, founder and executive director of STEM Early and also a faculty here at CEI. So we've heard about high school practices, we've heard about elementary practices. So I'm coming in from the early childhood perspective. So what I do is I offer professional development in the fields of equity and STEM. And so a lot of people want to know how mindfulness relates to STEM, because I do offer mindful STEM. And I always get questions about how is mindfulness even related to science, technology, engineering, and math. And mindfulness is very much a part of the engineering design process, the art design process. And I say that because you cannot, I guess, produce the solutions that we're trying to come up with through STEM education without actually being mindful, right? And so you have to notice without judgment. So we teach our students and teachers how to teach their kids to notice without judgment. And we're so grade driven and performance driven in the education system that this is a great way for kids to just be in the moment, to notice without judgment. I'm really big on project-based learning, but if you do project-based learning without mindfulness, then you'll be stuck in either the past. How did we come up with this? What was the issue that made us want to build the playground in our community or the green garden? Or you'll be in the future. I wonder how this playground will come out. I wonder what's going to happen when our green garden is finished, versus being in the moment, right? Being in the present. Process over product and being present. That's what mindfulness is. And so we invite our students to just notice without judgment and be present, because learning doesn't happen in the past. Learning doesn't happen in the future. Learning happens in the present. And if we're constantly worried about how's this going to turn out, or we're constantly worried about, oh my goodness, there's so many problems we need to solve, then we're not going to be here in the present, and learning is not going to take place. And I believe that's why students who practice mindfulness perform academically better, because they're actually present where the learning is. The learning isn't on the test, and the learning isn't, oh my goodness, how did we get here? The learning is right now. And there was a experiment that was done that I thought was really fascinating, where a teacher gave all the students owl pellets. And if you know anything about dissecting owl pellets, they all look very similar, right? And so the teacher just gave all the students owl pellets and told them just to notice the owl pellet, and just notice it, examine it, study it. And the kids are like, well, what are you going to do with it? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what we're going to do with it. I just want you to study the owl pellet. Notice its intricacies. Notice whatever it is about that owl pellet, right? And so the kids kind of got to know their owl pellet for 5 minutes. And then she put them all in a container and shook them up. And they were like, no, because they kind of got used to their owl pellet, like that was mine. And she shook them up and she put them on the table and said, now find your owl pellet. And like 100% of the kids found their owl pellet. There was no arguing, like you have mine, because they were able to notice and be present with that particular object. And so when we're going through the engineering design process, especially for early childhood, which is explore, create, and improve, we need to be mindful when we're exploring without judgment. When we're creating, we need to create in the moment without judgment. And especially when we go to improve, right? We need to be mindful of what we've already created, and know that it's okay to fail, that failing is a part of the process. And it's okay to be angry that your thing didn't work, and not try to get kids to disassociate themselves from their emotions, right? Especially our young boys, especially our boys of color. Like, we need to make sure that they're able to emote in a safe space, and not be labeled, right? And know that their emotions are very much a part of who they are. Because if you don't get in connection with who you are and who you are emotionally, you won't be able to grasp and attend to the pedagogy we're trying to give, right? And they won't be available to learn. And so that's kind of how I incorporate mindfulness into my practices as a STEM teacher and also as a STEM educator for teachers. It's very much, and I love what you said, Carrie, it's not a thing. I don't say, okay, now in the engineering design process, we're going to be mindful as we explore. No, I teach them so that it very much becomes integrated into who they are. So that way, when they go home, and they may be going home to some traumatic situations, that they can say, okay, I don't like the way mommy and daddy did this. I don't like the way that this happened. I don't like the sounds I'm hearing outside of my apartment building, but I can breathe and just notice and be aware that I'm angry right now and I'm very upset. And what does that, and not judge me for that. And so I really appreciate the practice of mindfulness. And for all the people that are like super academic and think that it's just fluff, they just need to look at the research and see that those who practice this do better because they're able to be present where learning happens. And learning happens not in the future and not in the past. Learning happens right now.
Wow, Dr. Harris, thank you so much. And now, Michele, can you talk some more about mindfulness?
Yes. So wow, I always love to listen to Dr. O. She gets my energy level up. But I do want to say what she was saying about integrating mindfulness seamlessly, right? Naturally, like Carrie talked about, Brian talked about, is so critical. It is a way of life, a way of being. It is not an add-on. It is not something extra. And even though we're talking, Chris, right now about students particular, when we're talking about the practice of mindfulness, we're talking about all of us. We must practice first. We must practice with our students side by side, with our clients, with our families, with our whole staff, because that's when it becomes seamless and so natural that you can't tell. It becomes the new way of being. And, you know, fake it until you make it. I say fake it until you become it, because that's what mindfulness is about. It's through that practice that you arrive at a better place and become it. And when you talk about the 5 C's, right, Chris, we're talking about consciousness first, that wonderful foundation that all of you spoke of, being fully present in the now. You can't see something 4 seconds from now, and you can't smell something 3 seconds ago, or maybe sometimes you can, you know, but that was just a tongue in cheek. But seriously, being present and fully understanding where you are, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's not about stuffing down those feelings. It's about acknowledging them, moving through them, through that calm, in that clarity, and coming out on the other side, right? So that we're all in a better place. We're all elevated to a greater wellness. You know, that saying that says, when we are well, that wellness spills onto others. But when we are unwell, that too spills on to others. And I think whether you're a teacher, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a social worker, whether you're a parent, a spouse, an aunt, an uncle, that we all know when we take care of ourselves and we practice the practice seamlessly, it just becomes part of brushing our teeth every morning, right? The same thing, because a brain on fire is no way to learn. And with greater consciousness and in tuning into that full presence of emotion and sensation and what's happening allows us to have an open heart and a more compassionate heart to understand others, right? And through understanding others and understanding ourselves, we can really develop greater confidence in ourselves, each other, in the world. And with confidence comes courage. The courage to be stronger than you know. I always tell my girls, everything you need is right inside of you. That's the message we need to explain to students or whoever we're working with, is that they have what it takes inside of you. And mindfulness helps them understand that. I can self-regulate my emotions. I can take a deep breath to really calm myself down so that I can open up the prefrontal cortex of the brain for learning and absorb what's in front of me. And through all of this, the community, right? We're all in this together. When I hear Brian talking about seamlessly, it's just part of what you do. It's so absolutely heartwarming, because isn't that what we all want? We all want to feel our best and feel better.
Thank you, Michele. And I want to say that, I've been talking with people over the last 9 months, last year, about what's happening with the pandemic. And many of us who are talking with you today have found that we've had to up our practice. So when we talk about self-care, we want to let you know that in order for us to maintain that equilibrium we've had to increase what we do with our movement, with our meditations, with our breath, because what we were doing before, for the most part, was not adequate for the degree of stress and trauma we've been going through. So if it's not quite working for you, one of the things we would say is do a little more. Okay, and with that, Dr. Berge, tell us about your position and how you incorporate mindfulness into what you do.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mason. And I'm just inspired listening to everybody. Love what everybody's saying here. Previously, I was at Brian Aiken's school, and I've been connected to Dr. Mason through that experience. 2016, we were trying to figure it out today. So I began working as a pilot school with the pilot program for the SCAT, which is the trauma-informed care tool. And Dr. Mason and I started working in that capacity. I was in the middle of doing my doctorate, which for education was a lot more data-based than a lot of education doctoral programs. So I volunteered to do some data analysis for Christine Mason. So that was an awesome experience. And I've always been passionate about the SEL practices and mindfulness, especially when I got to work with Brian. He's really connected me with a lot of things in that nature. My new role, I just changed jobs this year in a pandemic. Either it was a great idea or a terrible idea. So I don't really know what it's supposed to look like for a couple of reasons. One, it's a pandemic. And two, the position is brand new. My official title is the Dean of Social, Emotional, and Academic Learning. And so essentially it's an assistant principal, counselor, and emotional support teacher. So I do a lot of discipline. So I do level 2, level 3 discipline at our district, which would be anything from detentions to suspensions down to, kind of classroom breaks and that sort of thing, writing behavior plans. But I'm also helping to roll out SEL practices throughout the school district. So we have wellness committees and other committees working towards integrating SEL practices into the entire district. And one of the big pushes this year, other than hiring 3 of this position for the deans, was actually integrating it within classroom practices, especially at the elementary levels. That's where all the deans are placed. And one of the things, biggest barriers to this is giving teachers permission to practice SEL and giving teachers permission to actually do these things as part of their daily routine, but also to explicitly teach mindfulness, to explicitly teach what it looks like to be mindful, or even explicitly teach the CASTLE framework, which is really what most people look at as the kind of the guiding light for SEL practices. So if you're not familiar with that, it is a very great resource to look up activities, but also just kind of information on what the 5 core competencies would be for social emotional learning. So our big push, again, at the beginning of the year was to do that for the first couple of weeks. We gave them tons and tons of resources, gave them the first 2 weeks of in-service just to practice social emotional learning. And we started with teachers. So we started with the self-care of teachers, started getting that mindset to shift. And as you know, any mindset shift is very difficult. So we certainly have early adopters, and then you have the folks that are a little reluctant that are coming around today. And this is going to be an ongoing thing. So you have to stick with it. But one of my colleagues said the kind of the one-word quote, a one-sentence quote that really made the most sense someone was complaining about, this is just another thing on our plate. This is another thing to do, another thing to add to it. And my colleague said, no, this is the plate. This is what it is. If you're able to kind of master this or get kids to buy into this, and teachers, it makes such a huge difference in teachers' practices as well as in students' practices. And Brian stole mine. Bunny breathing is our first stopping point for all of our elementary kids. I had a discussion with a kindergartner who's having bus issues. And as any elementary school principal or teacher can tell you, the bus is the first place where we see major behavior problems begin. So, and in kindergarten, it's a sign that we're going to be dealing with this kid for a while. So, bunny breathing, she loved it. I said, bunny breathing. She goes, oh, bunnies. And then she just bought into it right away. So that is one of the big successes, but also, working with this explicit training and giving a common vocabulary for kids and students to work with. We connected it to zones of regulation for self-management and self-awareness. And we now have kids using that language. I'm in the yellow zone. I'm in the green zone. I'm in the red zone. I'm in the blue zone. And it really does give a common language. So again, permission to specifically teach this, explicitly teach it, but also permission for teachers to be able to, take time out of their day and put academics to the side for now and work on it. So we did that twice throughout the year, 2 weeks at the beginning of the year, and then 2 weeks when we came back from break as a natural winter break activity. And the last thing I would say is this ties directly into rapport with students. When you do this in your classroom with teachers and classroom teachers do it with their students, it builds rapport right away because you're worrying about the students' well-being and they get that. So if you're saying, I'm doing this because it's helpful, I'm doing this because it's going to help you be better, and it's not just about academics with you, it really does make that connection even stronger. So that would be my selling. If I, put that on the my commercial for that would be one of the biggest selling points. So thank you for the time, Dr. Mason, and I'd like to hear from everybody. So thank you.
Dr. Berkey, thank you.
Chris, just one point that I'd like to make quick to what Dr. Berge was saying is, remember, mindfulness complements SEL. They're a natural marriage. One's an inside job, one's an outside job, but that self-awareness and owning the ability to really create capacity to self-regulate is so important, and mindfulness practice we know does that. So when we hear you using the mindfulness practices seamlessly, it's just so wonderful because it really is, you can't have one without the other to get the highest sense of
absolutely. Yeah. And the through line, Michele, is that it goes through the entire CASTLE framework, because if I look at the responsible decision-making piece of the CASTLE framework as the end result. Like, what you really want kids to be able to do is make responsible decisions on their own. And, you're obviously not going to get that 100% of the time, but if they're not able to be self-aware and not able to be mindful of what their surroundings are and just take a pause and be in that present moment, like Dr. Rose said, they're not going to be able to make responsible decisions. They're not going to be responsible citizens. They're not going to be able to make good professional or personal decisions. So that is a huge piece of this. So I appreciate you connecting the two. And I like the inside-outside job. I'm gonna steal that one, Michele.
Well, the executive, please do, because executive functioning's increased with mindfulness, and that's what good decision-making is about, and flexibility. And so I've got something great to send out about that complementary marriage of the two, because it's so important. It's really one of the best marriages we can have.
So I'm going to ask Dr. Berge, you've got a very unique position. I'm wondering if you can put a paragraph together, and when we send out the recording from this session, would you insert a paragraph on your roles and responsibility, whether or not you have a mindfulness moments room or what you do with the discipline cases that are sent to you, et cetera? It might be good to hear about that. And I would ask the others of you too, if you have a couple of lines about what's worked for you, what's been most effective, your advice to others in terms of going forward. If you could say one thing about this, what would it be? I think that might be good just to have that little sampler that will go out with the recording. Okay.
You bet, Dr.
And
Mason.
thank you. And Corinne, you are in Montgomery County along with Carrie, and so glad you're here. And you've been such a huge help to me this past month or so. So I'm so pleased to introduce you. And yes, tell us how you use mindfulness.
Well, I am an assistant principal in an elementary school in Montgomery County Public Schools, where Carrie is also. And I started out in secondary, and now I'm so happy to be in elementary. I think it's the greatest place ever. I love being with the little kids. And this week, our teachers came back to school, and next week, our students are coming back. So we're in a place of like intensity right now. And I had spoken, Dr. Mason had come to one of our meetings at one point, and I was just like, how am I going to handle this? And Dr. Mason said what she just said before, you have to up your game of your own practice. And so that really
Corinne, I'm
helped
going to
me.
stop you for just a moment.
Okay.
You're fading in and out. I think
Oh,
when
okay.
you're
I think
a
I
little
just need
closer
to
to
talk
the mic,
louder.
yeah,
I just need to talk louder.
louder,
Thank
stay
you.
a little closer. It's better. Okay.
So I guess I got into mindfulness practice through yoga. And I started teaching students yoga, and I actually wrote a little blurb for the book about how I got into teaching students yoga, because I noticed that our students who came from more challenged economic backgrounds used to come to didn't have a chance to take yoga and extracurricular activities because their families couldn't afford to pay for them. So I started a yoga class for kids who were not able to afford to take those classes. And so it was a really wonderful experience for me, and has gone in a lot of different directions. But Dr. Mason, this week you had asked me to talk to a teacher who had taken one of the mindfulness classes. I don't know if you want me to talk about that, some impact that the class had, because we have a mindfulness coordinator in our district who teaches. And there was a teacher that I spoke with, and it was very profound what she got from
So
that.
Corinne, I'm going to ask you again, do you have any background noise too? Do you have a noise machine or a filter or something that's going on?
No, we're having trouble with our Wi-Fi at school right now.
Oh,
My principal put in to get some things fixed, because our internet has been a little unstable here in our office.
Okay,
So that
just
might be
speak
what's
loud.
going on. Sorry.
That's okay. We can hear you.
Okay,
Continue.
so
I'm sorry.
So I guess one of the things I would say is just being in a leadership role in a school. One of the most important things has been doing my own practice and being really present for teachers and present for parents. I started doing a little mindfulness practice twice a week for parents. And it was just a little pause, and I would do like 10 minutes a little while after the kids logged in. And that was very powerful. And to just give the parents a chance to just breathe. And I would do something that we learned from Jeff Donald, who is our mindfulness coordinator for the district, is I would just do like an intention, and then movement, breath work, and then a guided meditation. And, like very brief, but I think that was really, really helpful. But I did write a little note to myself that I wanted to say about what I think is important in a leadership role is to give teachers support to feel freedom from excessive judgment, especially as somebody who's in an evaluative position. And that there's a certain level of threat that they feel right now. People feel just tremendously threatened. Thank you, Dr. O. It's really sad. And there's a state of really heightened fear and perfectionism. One of the things I hear from teachers is they barely sleep right now. It's just a sense of complete overwhelm. So I just I have little conversations wherever I can, just like little bits that, that I put in little deposits in the bank to try to just have a safe person in their life. And the mindfulness is as much just for me to be able to be that, because I have to have my own emotional shield, because I don't want to get overwhelmed by their overwhelm. You know what I mean? It just kind of like triggers. And then I think about what I try to do when I talk to them is give them freedom to tap into their own strengths, their creativity. Teachers are highly creative people, and they're very like put on a track, right? Like they're so afraid to like do something, take initiative, or do something that's going to make them stand out. And And yet that's one of their best things that they do. You know, they do all kinds of interesting, creative things as teachers, and that's what makes them love teaching. And just that it's okay to be human. And this one teacher who I spoke with who took this class, it was really powerful to hear her talk about it, because she said every evening when she would take the class, she would think to herself, I have so many things to do. I cannot take this mindfulness class. I'm so busy. Oh my, you know, this. And then she realized that after she did it, it was the best use of her time, because that way she was able to give and have some boundaries around what she was doing. And she, it was cute. She said, I would think to myself, I can't do it. I can't do it. And then I would log into the class and I would think, of course I need to do this. Like, it was just so nice to talk to her. And she said that they're like working 24/7. They're putting in hours that are unsustainable. And that she said it was really helping her to pinpoint what it is to be here now and how important that was for her. And she's also a team leader, and she has to do that for the teachers on her team. And it also was giving her a sense where, like, you can just think to yourself the negative labels that people are, like, teachers are putting on themselves. And she was saying that she had to remind herself that taking time to breathe and take care of herself is not about laziness. It was just so sad to hear this person who, like, barely sleeps, works their fingers to the bone, and to take time for mindfulness. She said, oh, I have to remind myself it's not about laziness. You know, and that it's okay to not work through her lunch break. You know, don't work through your lunch break. Take some time to breathe. And I feel like sometimes if that's all I'm doing, like, I'd like to do more in like faculty meetings and to have some breathing, but I don't even know if they're ready for that. It seems so basic, but now I feel like my leadership is really, it's like one conversation at a time. And I have to, right, Dr. Odette, is all I can do. I can have one conversation at a time and then be my own even keel self, try to do as much as I can. And I've walked through the building and said to teachers, because we don't know what these kids are going to be like when they come back. I said, you tell me, let's build in a movement break. I'm so happy. Let me take them for a walk. You know, I'll do a little, you know, you just tell me, buzz me. I'm on my walkie. And I'm hoping that by just doing things that will make their lives, make the teachers feel more supported. Thank you. Making the teachers feel more, that there'll be a natural opening to wanting to have some more connection with mindfulness, because I can't, it's got to come more organically from the teachers.
So, Corinne, thank you so much. This, I mean, I'm just so inspired by all of you. And I'm looking at the time, and of course, we're running a little over, which happens. So if you have pressing questions, please put them in the chat box. And as we do this, I'm going to introduce Jill Flanders, our last speaker, who I've known since about 2011 when I started working with elementary school principals. And Jill's area of expertise is early childhood education. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, I'm now retired, but was an elementary principal for 27 years. And about 11 years ago, I think the origin stories are incredibly important as part of the journey that we're all on. In my elementary school at that time, which was a pre-K K1 building, we were operating in little pieces of brain gym, of yoga, of some mindfulness, second step. And with young children, we were becoming frustrated that not really any of those pieces were really attached to what was developmentally appropriate for our young kids. It really wasn't connecting and making sense. And with some input from some just absolutely marvelous parents in our community and staff within the building, we came up with what we thought was an incredibly novel, creative, new idea, and really refocused all of those pieces into something we came to call Kind Mind. And what was the most exciting and fun part of it was the focus on young children through music and dance. we invited a local storyteller to be part of our group as we were intertwining all these different things about Kind Mind. And he talked with the children, with every classroom of kids in the building, gathered stories, put them to music. And this became our Kind Mind community. I'm struck by stories about how you captured families and parents and how you take the time to bring them in. As this evolved over the course of a year, we did hold some after school programs and evening programs. We invited in children that would be coming to our school as new preschoolers or kindergartners and their families to learn about Kind Mind in our school. And so over an arc of 4 years, that really became a central theme in our building. And it is what children, we could hear them humming some of the songs as they were trying to get their acts together if they were having a hard day. So Brian, as much as I was struck with, we had the glitter tubes. That was, something that we used for some kids. We had the breathing and bunny breathing that worked for some children. We had, just center yourself and take a moment. So all those different things that you've all spoken of today were components of Kind Mind. When we moved on, I met Chris and found out that there was a lot more work to do with this and a lot of neuroscience behind what we were doing. That moved me into the next place about, so how do we make this not just stick in one school, but how do we grow this so that you can replicate it? And our goal within our school was that we would hopefully just replicate it as the children went on through middle school and high school. I retired, so I kind of gave up on that, but it's still a notion in my heart that there are components of Kind Mind that will resonate in other places. So joining CEI, becoming part of this, moved me along into a focus on policy. And that, since my retirement, has really been this next step. And it's marvelous to say that Castle isn't the only place you can go to find resources, to find support and information on what might work and different things to try. So knowing that, in retirement, I have had the marvelous opportunities to join in with some other groups as we're really focused on social emotional learning, mindfulness, and the neuroscience of child development, combining and becoming part of what's the core of education. It is also really exciting for me to see this starting not just in public school, preschool, but really starting at birth. So in Massachusetts, we have a Department of Early Education and Care who 4 years ago put forth standards for social emotional learning and play for preschool and kindergarten. We have a thing, it exists. Again, it is the goal that will now move on in Massachusetts as a thread through our standards. It takes too long. I would like things to go a lot faster, but it exists. We also, through another group that I will put into the chat, our Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts, again, another group that has been operating for more than 10 years, is focused on not just making sure that SEL is a component of public school education, but it is a community component. And we have done work for full communities, for school committees, for town managers, for mayors, for the governing boards, to bring social emotional learning as a component of your community, that there is somewhere to be grounded, to have a common language, that it's not just a school thing, it is a community focus. So it's, to me, those are the things that happen next, that we work on policy, we work on bringing people together, and the notion that this is not just one more thing, but it is the plate, is a central notion to community work as well. So I think,
Jill,
Chris, that is what you wanted me to talk about. there is obviously lots of work to do. Massachusetts has fits and starts. We're, in that same place in pandemic world as you all are right now. But it's been so exciting to me to see each conversation almost always comes back to the well-being of whom you're talking with, of the community you work with, and the goal down the road. That this is not a separate thing. This is an intertwined component of everything that we do with children, with families, and with our communities.
Excellent. So here we are at the top of the hour, and I'm cognizant that it's the middle of the day and you may not be able to hang on. I will just say quickly, we will have one more session in this series in April, a Wednesday. I think it's the 14th. Is that right, Michele? Okay, and it'll be noon to 1. The topic will be executive functioning, integrating mindfulness into academics, and leadership for mindfulness, heart-centered learning. We will again have a panel of presenters and proceed pretty much like today. If you have questions, please go ahead and send them to Michele or me. And if you want to hang around, we'll stay around for like 5 to 7 minutes if anyone has any questions of us. Otherwise, thank you for your attention. I hope you do well. And I really hope that mindfulness can bring some joy, some happiness to what you're doing.
Be well, and thank you, panelists. A+ job.
Dr. Mason, there was one question in the chat from Tanya, and she just asked if there's any formal training for mindfulness, any certifications or anything like that.
What we do actually is we don't have a certification through CEI, but we do have trainings such as the mindfulness book series that we've done. And let me know, send me an email. We have things that we considered doing. So it's a matter of building up the practice so that we can get them to you. We love our brand. We think it's the best thing out there because it is simple. And you don't have to focus on 120 different things. It's the 5 C's. And what do? How do you become consciously aware and integrate them throughout your day, throughout your life? So happy to do what we can to help you, your staff, others to learn more. Other questions? Okay, we also have a place where we archive information. If you send me your email, we'll make sure you're on the archived, repository on Basecamp, it's called, and we can dialogue there as well. So happy to help support your practice. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. And to our panelists again, just love hearing you talk. I just so appreciative of all you do. It does make a difference.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, take care.
Thank you.